Hello, welcome to another edition of Leafless, Not Lifeless with Sharon Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining me. Listen, have you ever had the experience where someone stole something from you, took what rightfully belonged to you? How did you get back? What was your bounce back? The influences in your life, how did you make them beneficial? How did they benefit you? Well, my guest today is Robert Burg, who is an author, does radio, television, does writing, does planning, does a number of things. Well, he had an experience in his life where someone actually took something from him, but he has bounced back. He is a writer, playwright, and an author, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. And you're going to see how, although in those situations where things were taken from him, where he was not given fair treatment, he was actually growing and developing. So, Robert, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Ms. Benjamin? I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm sure that what you share will certainly benefit the listeners and the viewers as well. So, Robert, let's just start out. Tell us a little bit about yourself early on before all of the big things happen.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm Robert Burg. Greetings to everyone out there that'll see this and hear it. Grew up primarily in Alabama. I was reared and raised by my grandmother, my mother, um, father, uncles, that kind of thing. So a big family, come from a big family. I got into a lot of things growing up. I always was attentive and paid attention to my elders. So I guess I was called mischievous. I was called persistent, that kind of thing. So I think growing up around the people I grew up with, they taught me how the world was early on. They taught me a lot. Sometimes might have not been the good things, but they taught me a lot. They really, when you look at it in a broad frame, they showed me how the world was. And as I grew, elementary, a couple of accolades, sometimes an AB student, sometimes not, middle school, so stretched on for middle school and high school. Yes, ma'am. So
there were times when you listened and sometimes you just kind of did things on your own.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly.
All right. So are you an only child?
No, ma'am. I have a sister. I have a sister and a brother. Yes, ma'am.
Are you where do you fit? First, second, third?
Last.
You're the baby of the bunch.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned your large family and influencers. So you shared with us or with me about at least one of them. So tell us about this person. I'm going to let people see this influencer. Go ahead, tell us about him.
Well, Uncle Jeff was the person I was with when mother and father had to, go to work. He worked as well, but their hours didn't consistently, match his. So I was with him. I ended up with him sometimes with my grandmother and my grandfather, which were his mother and father. But primarily I was with him. He was younger, had a little bit more time to attention, I guess, at the time to be with me, and a little bit more patience. And so he just, at the time he grew up, I'm gonna say it the way I always say it to myself. At the time he grew up and I was around him in the 90s primarily, he could have been anything bad because the influences, the society at the time, he could have been drug dealer, anything dark, but he was light. And when I say light, I mean it literally. I never seen him do anything bad. Nothing. He was, every time I was with him, and I always seen sunny, like the sun was shining. And he was the first person I looked at and I said, I'm actually with him. And he was a music lover. He was the first person. I used to always wonder why he was always doing stuff to his car. And I didn't realize the value in it. He was actually working on his own car. He was changing his own oil. He was rotating his own tires. He was his own mechanic. He could work on cars. I found out later he was an artist. He could draw. He used to just draw. And I mean, he just loved, he was fun. I can remember him being in the shower sometimes, hearing his voice coming out of the bathroom. He'd be singing. He always loved to sing. But Bob Marley, Tupac Shakur were two of his favorite artists.
So
And he
you
loved
really, so you really looked up to him and kind of helped to catapult you into some of the things that you've done. So tell us a little bit about your education and training.
Okay, as far as education, like I say, I went to Brighton Elementary, ended up going to McAdory High School. Primarily, I always was a writer at heart. Always. I wrote my first song in the 3rd grade at Brighton Elementary, and I shared it with some young ladies. And I wanted to write a song.
So you were trying to woo somebody?
Not necessarily. I think I guess I confided and trusted them more that they wouldn't be too hard on me, because the fellas, I'm pretty sure they would have ranked me a little harder. But so, and I started writing, and by the time I was 12, like I told you the story about the street, one of the streets I grew up on was named Dunbar. And I always heard about the school that was named Dunbar. And one day the voice came to me and said, "You're going to write." And then I had an experience at Brighton Elementary that led me into writing, where my teacher, Miss Nichols, was the art teacher, and she was telling us how art and poetry and prose go together hand to hand. They complement each other. And I had the opportunity to go into the computer lab, and she told us to find us a poet or a poem that would complement the certain drawing or art piece that we wanted to choose. And I found Paul Laurence Dunbar, and my life changed. And you know, throughout high school, sometimes the teacher I can remember being in business administration class, not paying attention to anything. I'm just writing. And one of my classmates looked at me and said, "Robert, why are you taking notes?" I said, "I'm just listening." But I was actually writing poetry. So I took French. I was a lover of language. French was my was what I chose. Right now the word escaped me. Selective. It was a selective course, and I selected French. I was big on literature, English, and perhaps history, social studies. Those was my faves. You know,
So those, when you talk about those, your writing, those have influenced your writing, and you also did some or still do some broadcasting.
Yes, ma'am. And that's another thing. So when I got out of high school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I really didn't. When I was growing up, I thought about being a city worker, but I started off working in in the grocery business. So when I graduated high school, you know, I used to always pay attention to the TV. You know, you look at TV, you see the personalities that's on TV. You in your car, you riding with your mother, you riding by yourself, you hear the radio announcers. And so as I led myself into another career path, I ended up wanting to go into broadcast. And I said, I want to go back to school. And I had an epiphany that I told you about. And I woke up one day because I was stressed out, and too young to be stressed out, but I was stressed out. And I said, I want to do something different. I want to do something. And I seen the college recommendation to come to school, enroll. And one of my favorite TV personalities was Sherry Jackson. She was on CBS affiliate. She was on CBS News 42. And I got into media production. Did some courses, took courses, and was successful at it. Ended up being one of the top students in that class for certain semesters, where I was also elected as one of the people that had a lot of outside of the classroom activities going on that came back into the classroom that helped kind of catapult me into a person that was actually about his business in the course and the things I was doing, taking internships at local broadcasting stations, that kind of thing.
So you got into writing as well.
Mhm.
You did some writing, and tell us about that experience. You talked about how something was taken from you and how you bounced back from that.
Exactly. So I ended up being after school, after college, that kind of thing, I ended up getting an opportunity, a golden opportunity. I still feel is a golden opportunity because it taught me a lot. But later on, I ended up doing a story. I was at the picture, but then it ended up my name wasn't on it. Some people may look at it, it could be petty, could feel like a vanity type thing, but when you put in work and you're striving to do something, sometimes it can kind of hurt you. I think of the great Wilson Pickett, his first song that he ever wrote that went through the roof on the charts. You not to mention money that was supposed to come to him. It was taken from him. His name was taken off of it. And I felt like Wilson Pickett at that moment. and money wasn't even the issue. It was just the
unjust, just someone being unfair and
Mhm,
not
mhm.
being honest.
Yep, and just the integrity of it and all of that kind of thing. And not even about fame and glory, but just to have some, I mean, I was there. Why your name is in my place? That's, not right. And so, like I told you, it was a situation where it could have been misunderstood that it might have been a mistake. But like you told me, people are going to be people. So what was covered could have helped their name just as much as it would have helped mine. So it could be looked upon as, oh, you might have done this on purpose. So what I learned from it and what I took from that is, protecting myself and all that kind of stuff. You deal with copyright and, making sure your stamp is on it. And one thing I was always told was about a poor man copyright even, have even a poor man copyright. So I took it as a little knock on the shoulder.
How did you bounce back? How did you bounce back?
I bounced back, and like I just said, I may be contradicting myself, but I ended up still being paid properly for it. It was handled in the way it should have been handled professionally, and I was taken care of. But at the same time, it taught me how, just because I got the money, my name is still not a part of this piece. So they could hold me back from a particular or important piece of history that my name is not a part of. But at the same time, it taught me and I bounced back from working harder and ensuring, hey, when I do this and do that, my name is going to be on this piece and my name is going to be on my pieces. So let's get that understood before I submit anything else or continue working.
Exactly. So you also talked about how sometimes you have even held yourself back.
Mm-hmm. So I think, and that's primarily like the book you mentioned that I wrote. When you and the uncle, going back to my Uncle Jeff, and even my mother, my father, grandmother, grandfather, you coming of age, and in the society that I came up in, and at the time, I think Obama was just being elected as president when I was coming out of teenage years. So that was, an influence. That was, a push. But at the same time, Obama has found himself. I haven't found myself directly. I need some motivation. So sometimes you subdue yourself into what society may want you to be. You may hang with certain people, or you may not go after your own potential the way you should. What grandmother, mother have taught you, you kind of let it slide because people are gonna look at you different. They're gonna treat you different. Oh, he trying to do this, yeah. And so I held myself back. I was ashamed of my talents. I was ashamed of my gifts.
So why? You know, early on, you talked about the large supportive family. Why do you think you even allowed that to come into play, to downplay your talents and your dreams and your ability?
The darker, like I say, society that I was in, because it wasn't anything smiled upon. You know, oh, you write, or you may sing, you may want to be an orator, a public speaker. That's not actually clapped. It's not clapped upon when you want to do those certain things.
In certain environments.
Exactly. And so the people I was around primarily at the time, they weren't doing anything different. Everybody was doing the same thing. You know, it was about maybe going to work, doing a little things on the side, things that could sometimes be dangerous, sometimes things that could elevate you, but only elevate you to a certain level. No progress, not to strive for more, the better side of yourself, the talented part of yourself. It wasn't talked about, because I can believe some of those guys or some of those people were ashamed as well, because nobody had told us, hey, yeah, do that, you need to do this. You know, outside of sports, you know, certain things aren't, you know, congratulated sometimes.
So Robert, let me ask you, how did you break away from that? Because so we're talking leafless, not lifeless. And it's obvious that even with your having that somewhat of a setback because of your immediate influences, how did you break out of that and feel better about, oh, I know I want to do better. I know I want to go further than what I'm seeing right now?
My Uncle Jeff, started thinking about him and where he would be. I always pictured him, he would have his own business. The people he listened to, Bob Marley being who he was, sometimes he was controversial. But if he had kept his mouth closed, he wouldn't be the Bob Marley we knew, that stood up for something what a lot of people consider right. And I said, now, I like Paul Laurence Dunbar. I look at Paul Laurence Dunbar, look at Uncle Jeff, Bob Marley. Some of my teachers, Miss Stewart, people like that, Miss Pauline Zimmerman, they invest the time in me. If I don't invest in me, I'm going to be ashamed only to myself personally, because I'm going to look at somebody and say, I could have did that.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Exactly. So, okay, everything here, like I told you, is staying stagnant. Let's take a step further. So I took a step further. I went out on faith, found faith. And some told me, you say you're going to write a book, you're going to do this and do that. Are you really? And that's what the mirror kind of said to me.
Well, let's talk about that, because you broke away and you did some writing. So you shared some things with me. I'm going to share with the listeners and viewers right now. You did tell us about the play that you wrote.
And so that was a part of the breakaway process. I started seeking out things in my environment, the things that I wanted to be a part of, and to shine that light upon some of those gifts in places that I wasn't aware of existed. But when you seek, you find. And I found people, I found theaters, I found these places. Ended up being on the board for a while. And so I presented, I said, I have a play I want to write. And they said, really? Because we're going to have a play contest. And I said, okay. And so I submitted the manuscript for it. And they said, you wrote this? I said, yes. It was like 20 plus pages, like 20 to 35 pages, because it was a short play. They wanted a short play with a certain word count. And so I wrote it. It was already in my mind as soon as they presented. I said, if no one else, includes their writing, I'm going to submit it, even though I'm on the board or what have you. And I submitted it. And I was the only one that submitted a play that year. And they said, we're going to stage your play. And I said, really? They said, really? we're gonna stage it. So what I did, I found the actors breaking away from, that stagnant level.
Yes,
I
yes.
found people. I was networking with people that were in these facilities that wanted to do this, and I had a great cast of like eight people, and we just did a reading of it, and it was great. It was a great feeling.
So tell us about it, because we're seeing the picture of the playbill. Tell us about the play. Give us a snippet, a synopsis.
Okay, so 2-Minute Bosses, it wasn't necessarily autobiography, autobiography account, but it stemmed from related sources. Working in a facility where it's no camaraderie. Everybody wants to be a boss. It may be the man that works right alongside of you, that's not the manager or this, that, and the other, but they always want to tell you what to do. Being young, working around older people, and having to deal with so much, because sometimes it can be stressful because we don't give younger people a chance sometimes.
Exactly.
And I personally dealt with that, always having to fight. And when I say fight, mentally,
Yes.
to prove yourself. You always have to prove yourself. I mean, I'm on the clock, I'm working. What more do you want? I'm not causing any trouble. What more? And it's 2-Minute Bosses. And 2-Minute Bosses was based around a cleaning faculty or a cleaning crew. And they worked in this facility. And it also dealt with a lot of things that the youngsters were going through at the time, a lot of violence. Gun violence. It dealt with gun violence, and it dealt with not necessarily mental ills, but more so just trying to make it to another day. And a group of people on the same level, but not necessarily on the same level, but they realize the people we're talking about out here that's doing all this stuff, we got one of those generational pieces right here with us. Let's try to change and invest in him or her and teach them the knowledge we do know, instead of always, riding them.
Well, you seem to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things. How long did the play run?
It ran for 2 weekends.
Two weekends. Awesome. Awesome. That's wonderful. So you've written something else. Let's share here. I'll keep going. Tell us about this book.
That book.
Give us a brief synopsis of this book.
Yes, ma'am. So that book had primarily been written by the time I was 17, maybe even 18 in finale. By the time I was 18, it was completed. So that was, like I say, trying to break out of that stagnant, trying to progress, making a step further. And so I said, by the time I was a certain age, I said, I need to get this out. I want to get a book published. And I kept talking to who I talked to. And one day, someone contacted me via email and asked me, was I interested in getting a book done? I mean, how great is that?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So you started writing this, or you say by the time you were 18, it was already written basically. When did you first start writing it though? Because you mentioned earlier about writing something in 3rd grade. I don't know, again, whether it was to woo the ladies or not, but but at any rate, do you have some of that in this book of what?
No, ma'am. That actually came between 9th and 12th grades.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it was basically, I was growing. It got to the point. It wasn't all about, because I realized, every song is not necessarily a love song from a man to a woman about this, that, and the other. Sometimes it's about personal things, your own hangups, things you're seeing in your neighborhood, things you're seeing in the world. It's broader things to talk about than the flesh or this, that, and the other.
So I'm sorry. So some of your poems are can we term them as autobiographical, or some of them leaning in
Yes,
that direction?
yes, ma'am. Some of them, and sometimes on the outside looking in, things you might have seen or come across, and overheard. Sometimes your ears, just being attentive, just paying attention to things. It could be the news, all of that. So all of it could be autobiographical, from a certain standpoint, but sometimes putting yourself in the shoes of those things you overheard, those things you may have seen. You may have seen a young lady who was having a hard time at home, might have not had the support to just be a cheerleader on the squad. Putting yourself in your friend's shoes who might have been dealing with death, of a parent, of a loved one, of another friend. And that's what I stretched into, and trying to give hope in verse and in poems. Because it was a lot of people that were losing their lives senselessly. And I said, if I have to take a chance, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna write it. I'm gonna write what's really been going on.
So
And
what do you have, any writings in the works right now? Anything that you're working on right now?
yes, ma'am. I'm working on 2 books, Miss Benjamin. Working on 2 books. If if I had what I needed, they'll already be out. But I'm working on 2 books. Also working on a memoir, in collaboration, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of things in progress. More poems,
That's
so to
good.
speak. Yes, ma'am, and more short stories.
That's
Yes, ma'am.
good. So are you doing any other acting or broadcasting? What's going on in that regard right now?
In that regard, with the acting, I'm trying to rework my chops. I say my chops because I like how Miles Davis, the jazz musician, I got to get my chops back. So I'm trying to get back into it. Been granted an opportunity, on the stage, at a local theater group, and yes, ma'am. So I'm still at it, Miss Benjamin.
That's good. Well, listen, I just think that the listeners and viewers are going to be really encouraged. And I hope that you are, and I think you are continuing to encourage yourself. You broke away from so many different things, no matter what was going on. And no matter how it looked to other people, you might have looked leafless, but you were actually still growing. And that's what this is all about. And here we go. People can contact you.
Yes, ma'am. They surely can. It's FAITHTRYR1 That's faithtrial1 or 205-719-7723. And that's me, Robert, for voice acting, acting for film, photography, writing, documenting, all of that. Yes, and we can do it for you.
That is awesome. And the way the world is working now and operating now, you can do things from wherever you are. Doesn't matter about the location. Robert, I am so excited, and thank you so much for sharing this very encouraging information about how you bounced back from what appeared to be a leafless situation. And for all of you who are viewing and listening, watching, thank you so much for being with me on this edition of Leafless, Not Lifeless. You can always contact me at leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. Please share and like and enjoy. Let other people know that we are here and we are sharing experiences as how people have appeared to be lifeless, but they're actually growing and they are prospering and becoming lively again. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Robert, again, thank you for being my guest. And we will see you the next time for the next edition of Leafless, Not Lifeless with Sharon Benjamin. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. See you all.